How to Solve Proportions Using Cross Multiplication by Emma. I wanted to make brownies for my family, and so I looked online and found Katharine Hepburn's recipe. The recipe looked good, but there was a problem. The recipe called for a square 8-inch pan, and I only had a 9 by 13-inch pan. But I can convert that using proportions. First I have to figure out the area of each pan. 8 times 8 equals 64, and 9 times 13 equals 117. This is how you set up the problem. The amount of the ingredient in the original recipe divided by 64 equals X, or the new amount of the ingredient divided by 117. The recipe calls for the following ingredients: half a cup of cocoa, half a cup or 1 stick of butter, 2 eggs, 1/4 cup flour, 1 cup sugar, 1 teaspoon vanilla, and a pinch of salt. There is a half cup of cocoa and a half cup of butter, so the math is the same. 1/2 over 64 equals X over 117. 1/2 times 117 equals 64 times X, or 64X. That is the same as 1/2 times 117 over 64 equals X. 1/2 times 117 equals 58.5. X equals 58.5 over 64, or 58.5 divided by 64. Here's the long division. The answer is 0.914, or 914 thousandths. I'll round 0.914 down to 0.91. X equals 0.91. I need 0.91 cups of cocoa and butter. Another way to solve this equation is to use the vertical method. The vertical method uses the relationship between the top and the bottom numbers. It will be the same on both sides. You would set up the problem the same way. The arrows indicate how many times the top number, 1/2, goes into the bottom number, 64, which is 128 times. That is another way of saying 64 divided by 128 equals 1/2, so you have to do the same thing to the other side of the problem and divide 117 by 128. The answer is the same as using cross multiplication. The next ingredient is the eggs. Let's try cross multiplication again using 2 instead of 1/2. The problem is 2 over 64 equals X over 117. 2 times 117 equals X, or 2 times 117 over 64 equals X. 2 times 117 equals 234, so X equals 234 over 64, or 234 divided by 64. The answer is 3.656, which is about 3.66. X equals 3.66, and I need 3.66 eggs for the brownies. The recipe calls for 1 teaspoon vanilla and 1 cup sugar, so the math is the same even though the amounts are very different. The problem is 1 over 64 equals X over 117. 1 times 117 equals 64X, or 1 times 117 over 64 equals X. X equals 117 over 64, or 117 divided by 64. The answer is 1.828, which I rounded up to 1.83. X equals 1.83. The recipe calls for 1.83 cups sugar and 1.83 teaspoons vanilla. The last ingredient is flour. The recipe calls for 1/4 cup flour, so the math is 1/4 over 64 equals X over 117. 1/4 times 117 equals 64X, or 1/4 times 117 over 64 equals X. 1/4 times 117 equals 29.25, so X equals 29.25 over 64, or 29.25 divided by 64. The answer is 0.457, which I rounded up to 0.46. X equals 0.46. 0.46 cups flour. Then I put in about 2 pinches of salt and mix all the ingredients together. We loved the brownies.